Lesson 7-4, Parallel Lines and Proportional Parts. Okay, so I'm going to give you something over here on the side. All right. You can, when you do a proportion here, the proportion can go one of two ways. It can go part over part equals part over part. And I'll explain that here in just a minute with an example. Another way you can do it is part over whole equals part over whole. So what I'm going to do is I do these examples. I'm going to try to point out to you an exact explanation for each one. Okay, so first of all, in this first problem, we are looking for this right here, which I refer to as the whole. Okay, and what I mean by the whole, it is the whole distance across those two parts here. Now, we don't know what this part right here is, but we know this part's 21. Okay, in the corresponding one, we know this part is 20, but we do not know what this part is, but we can find it because we know the whole was 32. So if I take 20 from 32, then that means that part right there must be 12. Now, that's important because I need that one. Why? Because this part goes with that whole. In the same way, this part goes with that whole. So I'm using this relationship over here. Part over whole has to equal part over whole. So my proportion becomes part, which is 12, over its whole, which is 32, has to equal part, which is 21, over its whole, which is x, what we're looking for. Now we do our cross multiply and solve. So we get 12x equals, get my calculator out here real quick, 32 times 21, 672, and then I divide both sides by 12. If I do that, then I get x is 56. Okay. Alright, let's do problem number 2. So I'm going to erase all this stuff here that I just did with this problem. Give you a second to finish writing it down if necessary. Okay, so now I got room to do problem number 2 here. Okay. In problem number 2, I'm looking for a part. This right here is a part. Okay. And what I have is I have the two parts on the left-hand side, but I can get the whole from here to here. How do I get that? By adding those two together, so that's 4. So now I'm going to set up my proportion. Part over whole has to equal part over whole. So again, I'm using that same relationship. So I have part over whole equals part, what I'm looking for, over whole. Do my cross multiply. Sorry about that. 4x equals 3 times 8 is 24. Divide by 4. So then x is 6 there. So this part right here would be 6. Okay. Let's expand this a little bit. Let's go to problem number 3. Okay. Now, in this case, it's going to be easier here if I go ahead and find this other missing part. And the way I do that is I'm going to take 8 minus 2, which would tell me this part right here is 6. Now, in this case, I'm going to use the other relationship. I'm going to do part, oops, let me fix that a little bit. Part over part will equal part over part. So I have 2 over 6 equals x over 15. Now make sure you do the corresponding order. In other words, 2 is across from the x, so the 2 and x have to be on top. The 6 is across from the 15, so 6 and 15 have to be on the bottom. So I do that, and I get 6x equals 30, divide by 6, and that's going to give me x is 5. Okay, let's go down to number 4. So in problems 4 and 5, it's the same kind of thing. The only difference is they're just not in a triangle, but it's the same context of the problem. Oops, didn't mean to get rid of all that stuff. Okay. There we go. All right. So again, I'm going to fill in some things I know. If this whole thing right here is 28, that part's 16, and I know this part is 12 because 12 plus 16 gives me 28. I'm looking for this. So in this case, I'm going to use part over whole. So I'm going to do part over whole. So x over 63 equals part. Now the part I have to use down here is the 12. Why? Because it goes with the x over the whole, which is 28. So 12 over 28. So even though they gave us the 16, we had to find the 12. Now we do our cross multiply. So 28x equals, and 63 times 12 is 756. Then I'm going to divide by 28. And if I do that, that gives me 27. So x is 27. Alright, let's go over to number 5. Stuff. Okay, number 5. So again, this one's pretty easy because we have the part and whole. Here's a part, and it corresponds to that one. Here's a whole, and the whole for that one is 14. So now I can set up my proportion. Part over whole. What I'm looking for is part 10 over whole 14. So cross multiply 10x equals, if I do 14 times 15, that's 210. Then divide both sides by 10. And that's going to give me x is 21. Okay. Have one more here. So here's one that is part to part and part to part. Again, make sure you set up your proportion right. So if I do 5x over 12, then on the top on the other side has to be 10 because 10 is across from the 5x over 8 because 8 goes with the 12. So cross multiply again, 40x equals 120. Then we divide by 40, and we get x is 3. Now that seems like a small number, but remember, I'll take the 3, if I plug it back in, that's going to give me 15, so that segment's 15. Now, one thing you can do here, let me write that 15 better. One thing you can do here, look and make sure your answers kind of make sense. In other words, 10 here is over 8. 10 is bigger than 8. So the number up here has to be bigger than 12 because 10 is bigger than 8. 15 is bigger than 12. So 15 makes sense. If I'd gotten some number like 10, 10 is smaller than 12, that wouldn't make sense over here because the bigger number has to be on top. So hopefully that's made sense to you. It's relatively simple kind of stuff as long as you set up your proportion correctly.